What are these? In the sprawling cosmology of Pokemon, the Lake Guardians occupy a strange space. They are not creators, nor destroyers. They don't shape the world, but reflect it, the human world in particular. When the higher gods carved reality into order, the Lake Guardians filled it with awareness. In Gnostic philosophy, the human being is a layered creature divided into three natures: the hylic, the psychic, and the pneumatic. The hylic self is material, bound to the body and its desires. The psychic self is more emotional and rational, the mind's restless mediator between flesh and spirit. The pneumatic self is the spark of the divinity, the part that remembers the higher world. Together, these form the tripartite structure of the soul, fragments of a divine totality struggling to awaken within a fallen cosmos. The Lake Guardians, then, can be read as echoes of these selves. Each guardian is of a specific kind. Uxie is knowledge, Mesprit is emotion, and Azelf is willpower. Azelf corresponds to the Aeon Theletos, or willpower, of the Resolve Syzygy in the Hylic Dodecad. Mesprit corresponds to several Aeons in the Psychic Decad, such as Akinetos Calm and Atofues Circumspect. And finally, Uxie corresponds to the idea of Gnosis at large, as well as both Nous Mind and Aletheia Truth in the Pneumatic Ogdoad. For more information about the Aeons, consult my previous video. Suffice to say, each Lake Guardian corresponds to one of the tripartite selves outlined in the Tripartite Tractate. Their lakes, verity, wisdom, and valor, form not just a geographic triangle but a metaphysical one. Together, they represent the total person, balanced precariously between matter and transcendence, between the self that acts and the self that remembers why it acts. To encounter the Lake Guardians is to encounter the self in pieces and layers. They are the mind dreaming of its own architecture. They are the fragments of the monad diffused into consciousness. And if Arceus is the divine source, the unknowable monad, the silence before creation, then the Lake Guardians are the moment the silence begins to think. So, who are these guys? The Lake Guardians share some themes in their etymology. Their names come from the acronym UMA, which stands for Unidentified Mysterious Animal, another name for cryptid. They also have in their name a mythological creature or sprite. Uxie, Uxie. In Japanese, Yukushi. U as in Uma, Z as in Pixie. It is the knowledge Pokemon. Uxie is the most visually different, its eyes being closed. This is very striking in a group of Pokemon that are so similar. In Japanese, its title is Shishiki no Kami. Kami translates to deity or god in the lesser sense, and Chishiki directly translates to knowledge. Its Pokédex entries are as follows. Some are omitted due to redundancy. Known as the being of knowledge, it is said it can wipe out the memory of those who see its eyes. It is said that its emergence gave humans the intelligence to improve the quality of life. When Uxie flew, people gained the ability to solve problems. It was the birth of knowledge. A Pokemon feared but also respected for stealing away the memories of evildoers. I have found records that suggest Uxie holds dominion over knowledge. Mesprit. In Japanese, Emurito. M as in Uma, spirit as in spirit. Emotion Pokemon. Mesprit is the most archetypical of the trio, the most expressive. Its title in Japanese is Kanjo no Kami. Kanjo directly translates to emotion as in feelings or sentiments. Its Pokédex entries are as follows. Known as the being of emotion, it taught humans the nobility of sorrow, pain, and joy. It sleeps at the bottom of a lake. Its spirit is said to leave the body to fly on the lake's surface. When Mesprit flew, people learned the joy and sadness of living. It was the birth of emotions. Known as the being of emotion, in legend, this Pokemon was feared, as any who showed disrespect would have their emotions thrown into disarray. Azelf. In Japanese, Agunomu. A as in Uma, elf as in elf. In Japanese, Nomu as in gnome. The willpower Pokemon. Azelf is also archetypical, having the most innocent and curious expression. In Japanese, its title is Ishi no Kami, which Ichi translating to intentions, wishes, or purpose. Its Pokédex entries are as follows. Known as the being of willpower, it sleeps at the bottom of a lake to keep the world in balance. It is thought that Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf all came from the same egg. When Azelf flew, people gained the determination to do things. It was the birth of willpower. This Pokemon is said to have endowed humans with the determination needed to face any of life's difficulties. The dreaded being of willpower. Legends tell of this Pokemon manipulating the will of its adversaries and turning them into puppets of its own. Azelf has clearly the most unique Pokédex entries. It references its fellow lake guardians by name, and in Legends Arceus, it is referred to as Dreaded. In the original Diamond, Pearl, Platinum games, the three lake guardians are found in their respective caves, but interestingly, Mesprit flees and becomes a roaming Pokemon. The lake guardians also contrast with Dialga and Palkia. If Dialga and Palkia are the creations of Arceus that represent the world, the lake trio represents the inner world, the self, or the ego. The colors of the lake guardians are also the primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. Their bodies are of a lighter cyan blue, and they all have red gems in the center of their foreheads, invoking a third eye. Arceus, taking the form of a mighty deer, descended alone into the vastness of the universe. And lo, within the void, it found a jewel, a green and blue sphere, and upon it did the One make its dwelling. From 3 pools upon the sphere did Arceus drink, musing in the silence of eternity. At the first pool it pondered truth, and from that verity was born Mesprit. At the second pool it pondered honor, and from that valor was born Azelf. At the third pool it pondered wisdom, and from that acuity was born Uxie. And the 3 spirits encircled Arceus as a crown, reflecting the thoughts of the original One. 3 beings whose power can hold both time and space fixed. 3 beings were born to bind time and space. As Arceus journeyed betwixt the lakes, it beheld its footsteps imprinted into the matter of the world. The first fell upon the plants, the second upon the waters, the third upon flame, the fourth upon the air, the 5th struck stone, the 6th the soil, the 7th the frozen sea, the 8th the metals of the deep, the 9th fell upon poisoned waters, the 10th was thunder. And in every step was hardened a plate, and Arceus commanded the spirits of the lakes to gather them together. Yet the One resolved to depart the world, and to depart it must take steps anew, steps of greater measure. The mythology of the Lake Guardians comes from the Diamond and Pearl games, as well as Platinum and Legends Arceus. This analysis will focus primarily on Platinum and Legends Arceus due to Diamond, Pearl, Brilliant Diamond, and Shining Pearl containing information that is made redundant in later entries. Platinum. Firstly, there is material in the Canalave library on the Lake Trio. It reads as such, quote, "Look not into the Pokemon's eyes. In but an instant you'll have no recollection of who you are. Return home? But how? When there is nothing to remember. Dare not touch the Pokemon's body. But in 3 short days all emotions will drain away. Above all, harm not the Pokemon. In a scant 5 days, the offender will grow immobile in entirety." This is in keeping with the questionably benevolent nature seen in the prior Pokédex entries. It seems that beings that can manipulate bodies, souls, and minds are quite dangerous. This could be compared with the Shinto Buddhist belief in kami that watch over nature but are largely ambivalent morally. When encountered in Celestic Town ruins, Cynthia has these remarks on the Lake Guardians. This quote has been shortened. "This cave painting. It's always been described this way. The light in the center either represents Dialga or Palkia appearing at the spear pillar, but the 3 lights around it were thought to be Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf. But then, I realized that there might be another way of interpreting this. Could this triangle of lights actually represent a different trio? Could they be Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina instead? And the large light in the center, does it represent something else? Could it be what created this world of ours? To the people back then, these Pokemon really must have appeared to rule over time and space. Seeing them must have shaken the people to their very core. This painting represents those feelings of awe, wonder, and everything else. It passed that memory to countless people, eventually becoming a myth. That's what I believe as a researcher of myths. I think I let myself get carried away and talked for far too long. I'm sorry. And thank you. Let's meet again." This quote has much more to do with Arceus, but it encapsulates the feelings people once had towards Pokemon and the Lake Guardians. Legends Arceus. In Legends Arceus, the Lake Trio served to create the so-called Red Chain, which is an artifact able to bind Dialga and Palkia. Outside of being a video game MacGuffin, this symbolizes the mastery the ego has over the physical realm. In other words, the control that a human has over time and space, symbolized in a crimson chain. From this information, let's construct an idea of the Lake Guardians. Each one has domain over a cave and a lake. Each one is morally ambiguous as a force of nature, and each one is said to have given humans certain cognitive powers. These beings are birthed directly from Arceus, and in spite of their ambivalent nature, they are described as protectors. 1. Abrahamic religion. Angels. The idea of being subordinate to God who dispense protection to mortals immediately brings to mind the archetypical angel found in Hebrew, Christian, and Islamic sources. The Lake Guardians have an alien humanoid appearance and fly, much like the stereotypical angel, but also share some more involved similarities. Angels like Ha-Satan in the Book of Job are shown to be ambivalent about humanity, much like the Lake Guardians, but angels are more often associated with being servants, which is not the purview of the Guardians. 2. Shinto Buddhism. Kami. The idea of kami was briefly discussed, and it is likely familiar to anyone with any interest in Japanese culture. The word kami refers to anything that can be worshipped, from god to gods to concepts, but kami specifically refers in Shinto to the naturalistic deities that represent natural features like lakes or mountains, or forces of nature like winds or rivers. Kami are embodied forms of musubi, a word meaning tie or bond, which represents the interconnectedness of the universe. Like the Lake Guardians, kami are tied to natural features and have domains. In their most basic form, kami are objects of awe and inspiration, likely things of beauty anthropomorphized in a formal system. The 3 Lake Guardians are tied to lakes, but they differ from kami in that they represent things that are not part of these naturalistic features. This doesn't disqualify them, of course, just invites nuance. I am not a Shinto Buddhist, and as such cannot speak with more authority on this, But if anyone has resources to increase my knowledge, or anyone else's knowledge, comment below. 3. Hellenist paganism. In traditional Greek mythology, there are numerous gods that represent similar aspects to the lake trio. The Titan Koios, or Koos, is a name meaning intelligence or curiosity. More traditionally, Athena is the goddess of wisdom and strategy, and Apollo is the god of knowledge and prophecy. Metis, the first wife of Zeus, represented counsel and cunning. Most directly, the Titaness Mnemosyne, one of Zeus's many lovers and the mother of the Muses and the goddess of memory. No specific gods directly correlate to the lake guardians, but there are clear ideas of deities representing and controlling mental processes. 4. Egyptian myth, Thoth. The god Thoth, or Doti in ancient Egyptian mythology of the people of Kemet, was a deity similar to the lake guardians, in that he is responsible for bringing them mental ideas such as writing and intelligence. He is also associated with esoterica and magic. This kind of Promethean figure for mental process is very present in even these older, polytheistic, pagan situations. Arceus, taking the form of a mighty deer, descended alone into the vastness of the universe. And lo, within the void it found a jewel, a green and blue sphere, and upon it the One made its dwelling. And in every step there was a hardened plate, and Arceus commanded the spirits of the lakes to gather them together. Yet the One resolved to depart from the world, and to depart it must take steps anew, steps of greater measure. The 11th was a skittering, hidden step. The 12th was a mighty step that rent the earth. The 13th was veiled in shadow. The 14th was silent as spirit. The 15th was whispered as a myth. The 16th thundered from heaven. The 17th was as a thought within the mind. And the 18th step was upon nothing. And so Arceus was gone. In its stead remained the plates, which the keepers of the lakes gathered unto themselves before they sank again into slumber. 2 make matter, and 3 make spirit, shaping the world. The being poured the remains of its power into stone, and buried it deep. In its name, Archkineas Nothi. Human beings have 3 parts. In Gnosticism, we call this the tripartite self. The tripartite self is older than 1st century Gnosticism and has its roots in Platonism, where Plato posited that there are 3 drives within humans: logistikon, knowledge; thymoides, passion; and epithemetikon, appetite. The Uma Pokemon correspond to one of these parts each: Uxie, knowledge; Mesprit, emotion; and Azelf, willpower. In Gnosticism, the tripartite self is more refined. Plato defines each piece by what it creates, but in Gnosticism, the tripartite self is defined what each piece is made of: the pneumatic spirit, the psychic mind, and the hylic body. You may have heard this stated as body, soul, mind. Whatever the name for these 3 parts are, they make up one discrete entity, a human being. 1. Body. First, let's define the body, home to the appetites. This piece is the lowest and most objective piece, and is encompassed by willpower Azelf. Azelf shares the idea of willpower with Christ Theletos, one of the Gnostic aeons. Azelf's most important Pokédex entry reads, "This Pokémon is said to have endowed humans with the determination needed to face life's many difficulties." Facing life's difficulties is the domain of the hylic self. Hylic problems are things like eating, sleeping, and getting enough socialization. These needs are involuntary, and failing to meet them results in death or more serious problems down the line. Physical illness, disability, pain. These are the issues we face in the physical world every day. To overcome these difficulties, we need to take care of our bodies and our environments. Many sects of Gnosticism preach about the evil of the physical world, and while to some extent that is indeed true, we cannot experience anything properly if we are not meeting our needs. If we are fatigued, we cannot learn. If we are in pain, we cannot focus. If we are under strain, we want to avoid it. The moment something in the physical world becomes a problem, our brains, in some sense, switch off. From the Tripartite Tractate, translated by Harold W. Attridge and Dieter Müller, from Part 2. Quote, "As for the material substance, its way is different and in many forms, and it was a weakness which existed in many types of inclination." The Tripartite Tractate defines material substance as weak and multiform. We see this in the world around us. A tree seems sturdy, but eventually it will perish and die, turning to ash or broken down matter in the stomach of a termite. Our bodies are the same way. They are weak and multiform, and they need constant upkeep in the form of food and breath and shelter. This, however, is not all bad, for eating and breathing and existing in shelter are very comforting indeed. This is where willpower comes in. Humans have an inbuilt desire to take care of themselves. Evolutionarily, we call this the survival instinct. As an example, your pinky finger is about as easy to break into with your teeth as a carrot. But if you try to bite into your pinky the same way, you find your brain blocks you from doing so. We have a massive aversion to harming ourselves, mental safeguards. Even so, these safeguards are not perfect. Sometimes we find ourselves burning the midnight oil to game with our friends or eating foods we know taste good but aren't nutritional. In this sense, we have to apply extra willpower to overcome these difficulties, a power that Azelf symbolizes. Another way to view the Hylic self is through the Hylic aeons, the dodecad. More on the aeons are in my Gnostic crash course, but aeons in their simplest forms are parts or components of God. There are 30 of them, and 12 of those 30 represent concepts relating to human beings and their bodies. These 12 aeons form 6 syzygies or pairs that demonstrate a larger concept. The pairs are advocation and faith and devotion, fatherhood and hope and providence, motherhood and love and nurturing, laudation and communion from veneration, community and blessings and sanctuary, willpower and wisdom and resolve. Each pair comes after the one before it. In other words, resolve comes from sanctuary, which comes from nurturing, etc. We can look at these aeon syzygies like a chain connecting us to something higher up. Each link in the chain needs to be very sturdy. From the bottom, resolve represents your desire to address the needs above, coming from willpower and wisdom. Do you have the will to change things if they are not good enough? Sanctuary represents shelter and environment, coming from community and blessings. Do you have enough to take care of yourself, like money and food? Veneration represents your goals and ideals. Where are you in your community? Nurturing symbolizes the care you give yourself and obtain from others, coming from motherhood and love. Do you know people care for you in a physical way? Providence symbolizes your fate, coming from fatherhood and hope. Do you have a strong idea of what keeps you going in life? Please note that fatherhood here is a non-gendered concept. Again, more on this in the Crash Course video. Devotion symbolizes your being, coming from advocation and faith. Do you have a strong sense of what you care about? Analyzing your Hylic self is of great importance. Even if you believe the physical world is evil, you must meet your needs before anything mental or spiritual can be done. 2. Mind. Next, let's investigate the mind, home of the passions. This piece of the soul is the mediator between the higher spirit and the lower body. It is also defined in Freudian terms as the ego. It is symbolized by emotion, Mesprit. Interestingly, Mesprit in the 4th generation games was not a normal encounter, but in fact a roaming Pokemon that needed to be chased after in the overworld. More on this later. In Platinum, Mesprit's Dex entry reads, "When Mesprit flew, people learned the joy and sadness of living. It was the birth of emotions." Joy and sadness are categorically different than what we have been previously discussing. The Hylic self deals in external unchangeable forces, whereas the psychic self deals with emotional states and thoughts. There's a sort of bridge between the hylic and psychic selves, the human brain, the cluster of neurons firing off in our heads. In this way, some might assume that thought being contained inside the brain is actually a subset of the hylic self, or that the idea of the psychic self is not real. This approach considers the brain as hylic component and discards the notion of psychic components at all. We can call this the physicalist framework. In other words, there is nothing that is not strictly physical. There's a larger debate to be had about physicalism, but for the sake of the length of this video, I'm going to simply state that I disagree with the physicalist interpretation. The brain is not only an organ that moderates behavior, and while cognitive behavioral therapy has its merits, it fails to address the broader mental world that every human has within them. A quote from the Tripartite Tractate, from Part 2. Quote, "As for the substance of the psychics, its determination is double, since it has the knowledge and the confession of the Exalted One, and it is not inclined to evil because of the inclination of the thought." End quote. This is a little heavy to digest, so let's take it apart. The substance of the psychics refers to thought. What does it mean that thought's determination is double? And what is the knowledge and the confession of the Exalted One? Determination being double refers to the idea that the mind can either turn towards truth or towards ignorance, two potentialities. In other words, is the psychic mind going to go higher towards the pneumatic self, or go lower and linger in the hylic self? Knowledge and confession of the Exalted One refers to knowledge of God. The psychic self is capable of recognizing God and conceiving of it. Finally, it is not inclined to evil because of its inclination of thought. In other words, the human mind is not inclined to be evil, but it is able to be misdirected. So, the same quote in more plain speech. The mind can go one of two ways since it can know God. It is not inclined to be evil, but it can be led astray. This is the central idea of the psychic self. We are constantly in our heads, planning, thinking, retreading old arguments, reminiscing, stressing. In a sense, our entire world is in our head. According to the magazine Science, as reported in the Harvard Gazette, humans spend nearly half, 46.9% of their time thinking about something other than what they are doing. In other words, for half the day we are a psychic self, and for the other half we are a hylic self. This time spent thinking is time spent trying to interpret past events and trying to plan for or predict future events. This opens up our minds to rumination, which can ruin our mood by inviting potentialities to increase stress. This leads to a psychological concept called analysis paralysis, where a subject cannot decide what to do next because of the insurmountable bevy of options. This leads to anxiety, which in turn leads to negative psychological effects and stress. Our mental state, in other words, is monstrously important. There's no way to solve this, but something in my own life I feel clarifies things is a quote from the Gospel of Thomas that I often bring up, from Logion 6. Do not do what you hate. Commit to actions that further your own joy, even if they seem like they might have an opportunity cost. Blow off the gathering with your family. Get a new job if you hate your current one. Don't clean your room if you don't feel like it. Obviously, I'm not advocating you just give up and live in squalor, but ask yourself, would you really do that? I think for most people, not doing what you hate actually encompasses most things that allow people to take care of themselves. This is the paradox of self-control. Too much self-control is actually worse for you than being lazy. It might feel like you're giving into temptation by blowing off Aunt Marie for Thanksgiving, but in that case, giving into temptation will deliver you more peace of mind. Many people become addicted to their own self-control and overwork themselves or harm their bodies. Logion 6 does not say, do only what you like. It says, do not do what you hate. Another way to view the psychic self is through the psychic aeons, the decad. They come in 10 aeons in 5 syzygies, and they are as follows. Profundity and fusion from synthesis. Immortality and unity from singularity. Circumspect and pleasure from temperance. Calm and synchronization from harmony. Uniqueness and bliss from euphoria. Just like in the hylic aeons, the psychic aeons come from one another, and each one depends on its previous. So, from bottom to top, euphoria comes from uniqueness and bliss, representing the joy and happiness of being yourself and doing the things you adore. Harmony represents how peaceful you are, coming from calm and synchronization. Patterns in our lives give way to peace of mind. Temperance symbolizes your sobriety and honesty, coming from circumspect and pleasure. How true to your needs are you being? Is there anything you're ignoring or suppressing? Singularity symbolizes how strong your ego is, coming from immortality and unity. You are yourself, and you need to find out who that person is. Synthesis symbolizes how you fit into the world, coming from profundity and fusion. Meaning can be found in your own sense of the world. Society tampers often with our ability to fulfill our psychic aeons. We feel like we're being judged and suppress something about ourselves. We give up being happy with being happy enough. We see this in the modern plight of queer people, from homosexuals facing discrimination to trans people being legislated against. Queer people are not the only people who face this kind of repression of their selves. Society makes it easier to conform than to be your authentic self, but this urge to repress hurts our minds. Remember the tripartite tractate. Our mind can go one of two ways. It can be pushed down into the hylic self by society, or brought higher with authenticity. The fact that Mesprit, the Pokemon symbolizing all this, is a roaming Pokemon encapsulates everything. Mesprit is emotion, and to access emotion we have to be patient and willing enough to chase it, to seek it, to do more work when it escapes. Mesprit flees Lake Verity, Lake Truth, because the truth is hard to find. 3. Spirit. Finally, let's investigate the spirit, home of knowledge, symbolized by knowledge Uxie. Notice that knowledge is the modern translation for gnosis, from which Gnosticism gets its name. The spirit is the hardest part of the soul to conceptualize because there is no physical organ where it is housed. It is something that is cross-cultural. From the book The Golden Bough by James George Frazer in 1890, the soul is investigated in an anthropological sense, and Frazer finds the soul in some form as a universal common human concept. From page 115 of the Gutenberg PDF edition of Volume 1, when describing foreign people's outlooks on the soul. If a man lives and moves, it can only be because he has a little man inside who moves him. The animal inside the animal, the man inside the man, is the soul. End quote. Further, from page 116, quote, addressing some aboriginals, a European missionary said, "I am not one as you think, but two." Upon this, the aboriginals laughed. "You may laugh as much as you like," continued the missionary. "I tell you that I am two in one. This great body that you see is one. Within that there is another little one that is not visible. The great body dies and is buried, but the little body flies away when the great one dies." To this, some of the aboriginals replied, "Yes, yes, we also are two. We also have a little body within our breast." On being asked where the little body went after death, some said it went behind the bush, others said it went into the sea, and some said they did not know. Now, to be clear about this source, this is a book published by an Englishman in 1890, and as such has cruel and uncharitable depictions of foreign nations, as I'm sure you can imagine an English intellectual from 1890 was sure to have. If you read this book, be warned. Other modern sources, however, corroborate this idea of the soul exists in most religions across the world. The soul is conceptualized as an invisible self that persists and is often permanent or hypostatic. Now, this gets slightly difficult because in Gnosticism, the word soul is sometimes interchangeable with spirit, and soul sometimes actually refers to a person's mind. So in this video, if I mention the soul, it is synonymous with spirit and pneuma from the Greek. From the Tripartite Tractate, Part 2, quote, "The spiritual substance is a single thing and a single representation, and its weakness is the determination in many forms." End quote. In plain English, the spirit is a singular entity in one form, and if it appears weak, that is because it is split into pieces or trapped. The spirit in this passage is depicted as weak. The spirit is a wilting flower that is not being watered. It is a weak, deteriorated object. Why? In Gnostic cosmology, we live in the real or hylic world. This world was created by the Demiurge, an ignorant creator who constructed the real world to choke out our human divine sparks. As such, we must contend with the fallen state of being and repair our pneuma. How do we do this? Uxie is the knowledge of Pokemon, the gnosis Pokemon. It is interestingly depicted as a sleep, and sleep is often used as a metaphor for the state of affairs we find ourselves in the Hylic world. We are asleep, and we do not know that we have come from a higher plane of existence. We do not even know that we have a spirit. What is the effect of our spirits being asleep? From the tri-track, our spirits being weakened in many forms, so how can we repair this? What is the opposite of multiform? What is the opposite of broken? Repaired. One. Whole. We must essentially become whole using our knowledge of God. This unified knowledge is of incredible importance. Previously, I talked about the pitfalls we experience in our Hylic and psychic lives, and the pneumatic self is the bedrock from which to gain stability in all these ways. There are 8 pneumatic aeons in 4 syzygies, and the lower 2 syzygies give birth to the Hylic and psychic aeons. In other words, the family tree of the aeons has 3 branches. The Ogdoad, which creates the Decad and Dodecad. The pneumatic aeons are the closest to God and closest to truth. The Ogdoad are as follows. The Being, which gives birth to the Dodecad, comprised of the human and the congregation. These aeons are given the particle the to indicate they are the idea of humanity and congregation in their entirety. They represent humanity both in the small and large form, humans as an atomized and as a social species. The consciousness, which gives birth to the Decad, comprised of the word and the vitality. Word comes from logos and vitality from zoe, which could also be translated as knowledge and life. They represent your consciousness, your psychic self, and how an ego comes forth from knowing things and being alive. The truth, made of the mind and the verity. The mind comes from nous, which is an incredibly important concept in Gnosticism and Hermeticism, and represents the soul in its totality, the template of being. Verity means truth, but comes from aletheia, which implies unconcealment. In other words, all information being laid bare. Finally, the mystery, from the depth and the silence. Depth comes from Bythos, and silence comes from Sige. These are the highest and closest concepts, as the mystery comes directly from God itself. To reach any higher would bring us face to face with the actual, real monad. These represent the eldritch depth and abject silence of God, and the void from which all creation comes and must return to. From these 4 syzygies, we get a better idea of what we stand to gain if we heal our spirits, and how to do so. We will gain a sense of self, a sense of consciousness, a sense of absolute truth, and further mysteries and adventure. To better contact these things, the theme of truth and silence both emerge, and across cultures the way to attain this truth silence has 2 names, prayer and meditation. If you want further musings on this and a path of yourself to gain this knowledge, visit my Patreon, where I have many sermons on such topics. After all, I can't cover everything in a video on Pokemon. Finally, to summarize all this, Uxie's Diamond and Pearl Pokédex entries. It is said that its emergence gave humans the intelligence to improve their quality of life. Known as the being of knowledge, it is said that it can wipe the memory of those who see its eyes. 4. Phase. In a previous video, I outlined 9 Gnostic phases and their meanings. During the course of this series, I will be categorizing each of the legendary Pokemon in one of these 9 phases. For more information about the phases, look at my video about it, with a link in the description. All 3 of the late Guardians are aeonic. Each one represents a different part, Hylic, psychic, or pneumatic, but they all serve humans to bring back their gnosis. As such, they are all in the faith phase. The description of faith is as follows. Phase of knowledge, aeonic, personal. Intuition is the most important thing to you. You have seen miracles, and you understand the beauty of life. Information paints beauty on the canvas of the world and the mind. Yet you are also affected by the hideous ugliness of the world. Covet and preserve the beauty you find, and believe in it. This underlines how all the fairies are trying to give humanity gifts, but also have a strange and sometimes cruel side, like Uxie erasing memories. This chart is expanding. Next time, I'd like to talk about the Hoenn legends, since those are the games I most enjoyed growing up. Usually I bring up critiques that I foresee that might get brought up during this video, but the comparison of the Late Guardians to the tripartite self I think is very straightforward. Again, I could justify my anti-physicalist viewpoint more, since physicalism is the largest enemy to my cosmology, but even if you don't literally believe what I am depicting here, I think it works as a metaphor. If you want more information about my anti-physicalist views, there's some sermons on my Patreon about them. And now, to end things out, a Gnostic prayer of my own writing. The humans in congregation hear the vitality of my words. I share with your minds the truth, I offer the silent depth, and a glimpse of the monad. Amen, amen, lego humin. The ending of the words is Nothi Ton Logan.